One of my favorite tours that we used to do was the Helter Skelter tour. It was 47 miles. It was almost 4.5 hours. It's hard to sign up for something like that because it's so intimidating, but it was good. It was like an immersion into the 60s, into the Tate LaBianca case. Not just about the murders, but it was about the victims and where they lived and where they played and where they worked. And it was a well-rounded tour, I thought. Now, we never memorialized our tour because we kind of shut down rather quickly. And so I never really was able to properly film the whole tour and get it all together. But luckily, Troy ran across this footage recently of the beginning of the tour. This is the very beginning of the tour. This is the introduction. We don't get to the locations yet, but this is how we kicked off the tour and how it all began as an experience. I always sort of said when the door shut, it was like transporting back to the 60s. It felt like we played the music, we had news clips. This is the introduction. Thankfully, Troy found it recently.
Can you guys hear me with this? Well, there we go. Okay, how's that? Can you guys hear me okay? All right, well, welcome again to my tour. I'm Scott. I will be your guide. Now, I play music, I use this microphone, and I play video throughout the tour. One shouldn't overpower the other, so if the music is too loud or the microphone not loud enough, let me know. I can do something about that. I've got the AC on in here up front. I don't have it going on back there. It should cool down pretty quickly as we're going on, but if you need it on at all, don't be shy. I've had people like go through the whole tour and then say, oh my God, it was so hot. And there's no reason for that because I can help you with that. So if you're uncomfortable, let me know. I'm going to put my phone on vibrate. I would appreciate if you would as well. And I think we're off. Give me a moment. Okay, lock the door so the crack horse can't get in. And off we go. And welcome to 1969. Now we're here to talk about two particular nights in 1969. It was Friday night, the 8th of August, and Saturday night, the 9th of August. To give you a bit of an idea of the time period, 3 weeks prior to the Tate LaBianca murders, the first man walked on the moon. 3 weeks prior to that, Judy Garland died in London, prompting the Stonewall riots in New York and the gay rights movement. We had civil rights going on. We had women's rights going on. The sexual revolution, the generation gap. The Black Panthers were on the scene. They were a militant black organization, almost like a black army, that a lot of people were afraid of back then. And they figure into this case quite a bit, as you'll hear in a bit. On the screens were Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Easy Rider. The Smothers Brothers were canceled that year, but Scooby-Doo debuted, as did Route 222 in another show called Love American Style. And the legendary concert Woodstock happened 1 week later. On the very day, August 8th, 1969, just a few hours before the Tate murders, the Beatles walked across Abbey Road in London and took their iconic Abbey Road album cover photograph, which is interesting because they figure into this case quite a bit. And also a bit of trivia, on the day of the Tate murders, the Haunted Mansion opened at Disneyland. But we're here to talk about the murders of 7 people, the Tate LaBianca murders. Now, some of you guys might know a lot about this case. Some of you may not. Is there anyone that really doesn't know much and is sort of along for the ride? I don't want to assume everyone knows what I'm talking about. And so if there's ever a moment in the tour where you're not sure about something, if I say something, because I am driving and getting places safely and controlling all this other junk. So if there's ever a point where I'm unclear about something, or if you need clarification, or I know a lot about this case, I don't know everything. There are people that know a lot more than me. So don't be shy about sharing any information, because I know when there's conversations going on in the bus, sometimes subjects come up, questions come up that didn't before, and it could be very it could be worth it. So please don't be shy to do that. Now, some of you may have seen the documentary we did a couple of years ago called The 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. It is a geographic retelling of the murders. Since I can't take you out to Chatsworth is about 40 miles from here, to be about 90 minutes, or Death Valley, where the Barker Ranch was, where these people were arrested for the last time, which is 185 miles from here. I could take you there by video. So I'll be using pieces of that. And there's also a lot of things when we made the video that we didn't have the rights to use that I could show you on the bus. So, and the first thing I'm going to show you is the opening chapter. It talks about the murderers, and the killers, and the victims. It's sort of an introduction of who we're going to be talking about today.
Helter Skelter, dictionary definition, noun, a tower-shaped structure found at a fairground with a spiral rack outside of it down which people slide on a mat. Now, according to Charles Manson, the concept was a little bit more complicated. His personal dictionary definition would have read, noun, the end of the world brought on by the Beatles. It's funny that such a silly song could become such a notorious expression. Manson's need to associate the Beatles' music with the Bible would be so distorted that it would lead to several pointless murders and scare the living hell out of everyone on the planet at some point in time. On August 8th and 9th of 1969, 7 murders were committed that became known as the Tate LaBianca murders. Stephen Parent, Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, Sharon Tate and her unborn child, Rosemary and Lino LaBianca. They were slaughtered by a group of kids in their 20s, hippies. Up until this time, we all knew what the bad guys looked like. They wore black and they hid out in shadows and they had shady expressions. They were predictable. Now, these murderers were kids, and these kids became known as the Manson family. Upon Charlie Manson's release from prison in 1967, he was let loose near the Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco, Hippie Haven. He was a singer, songwriter, not particularly good, not particularly bad, but he had a charm to him, and he began charming girls, petty thieves looking for guidance. Charlie became their guru. They brought a bus down to L.A. and holed up in a vacated movie ranch near Simi Valley, where he tried to make it in the recording business. When this case broke in December of 1969, it became even more fascinating. More murders were discovered, murder plots, Armageddon. It involved rock stars, Hollywood royalty, and hippies. You could not make this stuff up. Michelle Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas and a friend of Sharon and Roman said that after the murders, the rich and famous in Hollywood would live, at best, in an enduring state of anxiety and at worst, in paranoia.
We have a weird homicide.
In a scene described by one investigator as reminiscent of a weird religious rite, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate, who starred in Valley of the Dolls, was 8 months pregnant and was found in a bikini-type nightgown with a rope around her neck attached to the body of a man.
2 bodies inside, 2 bodies outside.
Among the other victims were Hollywood hairstylist Jay Sebring and coffee heiress Abigail Folger. Authorities would allow no one in an unofficial capacity inside the posh $200,000 home in the hills overlooking Los Angeles. When police arrived, they found the telephones and electricity lines cut. The bodies had been dead about 12 hours. They were discovered this morning by a maid who ran screaming to neighbors. One officer summed up the murders when he said, "In all my years, I have never seen anything like this before."
While the police admitted they had no suspects in the Bel Air massacre, there were 2 more murders 15 miles away in the Silver Lake section of Los Angeles. Market owner Leo LaBianca and his wife Rosemary were found by their children stabbed and mutilated. The word war was carved into LaBianca's chest, and death to pigs was smeared in the blood of one of the victims. The word pig had been scrawled in blood on the door of the Bel Air mansion, where actress Sharon Tate and 4 others were slain. But police said, despite the similarities, they do not believe the crimes are linked.
Actually, it took several months for the crimes to be solved, and it wasn't by any hard work on any law enforcement agency. It was because they happened to arrest one of the killers for something completely unrelated, and she had a big mouth, and she blabbed to her cellmate, "Guess what we did?" That was Susan Atkins, and she solved the case. The police screwed up spectacularly in this case, starting with the very press conference, when the chief of police said, "We have this weird homicide, 2 bodies inside, 2 bodies outside." Well, there were 3 bodies outside. He didn't acknowledge the kid, Stephen Parent, 18-year-old young man who was visiting the estate for about 45 minutes that night. As he was leaving in his car, he pulled up to the gate the very moment the killer, Tex Watson, came over the fence, and Stephen Parent became one of the first victims that night, or the first. Since his body was the first one found by law enforcement, the original documentation calls it the Parent homicides, not Tate, not Polanski, but Parent. So the kid that just happened to be there didn't even get acknowledged in the press conference. The case was on his name for a while. But the police, as I said, screwed up spectacularly, including the very days it happened. Since this happened in 2 different districts, the people investigating the LaBianca crime scene, the Tate murders were Friday night, and the LaBiancas were Saturday night. So those investigating the LaBianca crime scene reached out to those over in Benedict Canyon saying, "Look, we have multiple stab wounds, we have mutilation, we have words in blood and the word pig in blood at both places. We think they're related." But because of the social makeup of the 2 groups of people at the Tate house, there were young kids, hippies, swingers, couple, a small amount of drugs were found there. And one of the victims, Wojtek Frykowski, had known drug connections. So the police wouldn't even entertain something else, because the LaBiancas were just a middle-aged couple, not their middle-age, but they were just a middle-aged couple going about their business. They didn't have any sinister ties to them, and there was nothing, sort of unusual about them. Whereas, the Hollywood people, you kind of might expect something like a Roman Polanski, that kind of a thing. So, they reached out immediately. The guys at the Tate, the detectives over at the Tate crime scene said, "No, we're looking at drugs for this one." So it was their bullheadedness, their pig-headedness, and that screwed this case up. And you'll hear some amazing stories about how they screwed things up. But it's fascinating. We're still talking about this. It's going to be 48 years this August that these things happen. And Manson is still always in the papers. Leslie Van Houten's up for parole right now. She was approved by the parole board. She still has to go through another level of approval. That'll get shot down. I'm positive of that. But it's fascinating. The world is still very interested in these people. And Manson, Manson's only 5'2". He plays up the scary stuff, but he's not a particularly intimidating person. But he's been gifted with those crazy eyes. Now, we are in Los Feliz right now, and this is the LaBianca's neighborhood. These are their shops and their bakeries and all that sort of business. This is a photograph of Mr. and Mrs. LaBianca. They both had been married before. They both had children from other relationships. They had no children together. Mrs. LaBianca had a son named Frank, who was 15, and a daughter named Susan, there they are, who was about 20 or 21 years old at the time, the same age as the girls in the family. And the LaBiancas owned a boat. And earlier in the week, they dropped off Susan and Frank and their boat in Lake Isabella, and they were at a friend's house on the lake, and they were water skiing that week. This Saturday night, the 9th, they returned to Lake Isabella to bring the kids home and the boat home. Now, Frank Jr. asked if he could stay an extra night, and the friends agreed to bring him home the next evening. That's a decision that saved his life. So the LaBiancas returned to Los Angeles, Lino behind the wheel of a 1968 Green Thunderbird with the boat hitched up behind him and Susan in the back seat. They dropped off Susan at her apartment. You're going to see in just a moment.
I'll be uploading more clips as I find them. I am attaching at the end of this video a couple of pop-ups of the Last Supper video I did about the El Coyote restaurant and a little something on the LaBiancas about their lives. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Until next time.
You heard me.